Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? No? And are there any declarations of interest? No. And can I take the minutes of the meeting held on 4th of June? Can I take your approval? Agreed. Right. Update on the Chancellor's response to the sorry. I think so. Yeah, agenda item 4. So basically, this is the report, it's an update to us on the 4 commitments that we made as council in response to the phase 2 report, which was published in September. And if you remember, the commitments were part of the full council response in November. And what the report does, it tells you where we are, what progress we've made, and you'll see there's a tracker, and there are actions against every single one of the commitments. And this report says, where there are areas of progress, what the issues are, and what the risks are. And it's the first time that it's come to us, but it's already been to the OSC at its meeting in May, and feedback you'll see, and basically these updates are going to come every 6 months because it's incredibly important. We said we're going to do something, that we do it. And the commitments, if you look at 4.2, it tells you the commitments, the 10 board teams, and it was really based on the foundations that we've already done, all the changes we made. These are in addition to that. And they cut across a wide range of services and teams. And really the thing is how we embed these commitments right across the council. So again, you'll see where it says about progress, that we've got a working group of officers, we've got trackers, we've got regular updates to Maxine's team, and then every 6 months it'll come to overview and scrutiny and to us. And since May, so since it's come to the OSC and since the practice has been done, we have got an expression of interest for the independent advisory panel, and we have 37 applications, which really shows how interested bereavement survivors are in continuing the conversation with us. And the other thing that we've done since then is the Fairer Action Plan in April. So I think this is a really good thought. It's very clear. It's incredibly necessary, because what we don't want to do is make commitments and then everyone sort of goes away and forgets about them. And having them here, coming to ENC, coming to OSC, and this table of where we are, and then the other table about what the risks are, what the issues are, I think it's very clear. And thank you very much. And that's probably enough for me. Any questions?
You've explained that very clearly.
Thank you. Johnny.
Yeah, I just had a question on one of the risks at 6.1. So obviously, very much trying to embed this across the council in terms of culture change, etc. And it talks about the potential for there to be an over-reliance on a small number of individuals, excellent officers like Maxine, you, Callum, etc., who have been working on it for some years now. Yeah, no, you. I said you. Who have been working on it for some years. And I wondered if you could talk a bit more about how you're kind of working to strengthen and expand the words you use, cross council inquiry working group, so that the learning and the better work that we're doing now is being embedded.
Thank you, Chancellor, and a really helpful question. So the working group, I've been really encouraged by a number of kind of senior officers. We've got senior representation from right across the organisation, and from some of the key areas, all of the key areas, in fact, that Mix needs to touch on. I think, as Councillor Campbell suggested, the challenge is to strike a balance between giving this work the right kind of grip and visibility, but also really making sure that the commitments we made are properly embedded in the work that individual departments are doing, whether that's in housing or in customer access or in other areas, but to use that group as an opportunity to draw out some of the common themes and the common challenges and the things, and indeed to identify some of the risks and issues that we might need to escalate to EMT or indeed to leadership. So I think it's a combination of some detailed work that went on immediately after the inquiry report was published. Now a working group, which I think is working well, but we want to give a better grip of some of the key risks. So we've identified some here, but there's also some work we're doing to identify some risks in terms of different commitments and really keeping that grip and keeping that ownership of those issues. And I think that will allow us to strike a balance between making sure this is a cross-council effort, but also ensuring that it's embedded in the plans that individual services have, because we know that that's the best way to ensure that some of these things get done.
Kim and then Sarah.
Just to actually pick up, just expand a little bit on what the question of John, because obviously there's reference here in a couple of places about the role of members, elected members, and a risk of not being sufficient ownership. And then there's a reference here saying separate arrangements will be made to brief all councillors and the committee under feedback, saying it wasn't clear enough in terms of the role of them. So how do you, just looking at more the non-leadership, there's obviously leadership, right? We get a lot of information and briefing. Is still what your plans would be with board councillors?
Right, so we are doing some work with ward councillors, specifically with Nottinghamdale ward councillors, to make sure they're kind of briefed on this work and understand where we are with it. But I think more broadly, the challenge from the committee, which we heard both kind of before the report was published or before our response was published and afterwards, is about how we're using some of that expertise and experience of ward councillors, connecting with them, and also ensuring that senior officers and members of the leadership team are kind of visible right across the borough. And I know that the leader wrote in May to all the ward councillors, inviting them to participate in surgeries, which will involve lead members and senior officers, partly to address that issue that we heard through some of the engagement about people not being visible enough. The other really helpful feedback from the Obion Scruton Committee was really about ways of, and the committee's feedback, I think, has really helped move us on ways of measuring some of these commitments. So looking at kind of what sort of key performance indicators we have for each of these things, how we can demonstrate that we are doing some of the things that we've committed to doing more effectively. Some of these commitments are things that we will do and will be done, and but most of them are ones that we will need to continue to actually monitor.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, I just wanted to ask you about the independent advisory panel, because I know you've had a really good response, but when will the membership be finalised and when are they due to meet? So it says here sometime in July, which seems
We are. So partly, I think we weren't quite expecting the level of interest we got. We've got a good number of applications from bereavement survivors and a lot from local residents, actually from right across the borough, with a really interesting mix of kind of expertise and lived experience, both kind of personal and professional. So we're doing a bit of work at the moment, kind of following up with people individually to understand kind of their expectations for the group and to try and make sure we've got the right kind of balance of expertise across the group. I think that's going to take a little bit longer than planned, so I'm hoping we will have the panel established by the end of July, but probably realistically with the kind of summer break, the first meeting in September, and they will, but we're hoping to share some information in the meantime with them, with the members, about the independent review of culture, about some of the work that's already happened, and to get some ground rules agreed for the group. So I think it's been really important to make sure that people are coming with the right kind of expectation and that we know what people are coming with.
And just to highlight, of the Charter for Public Participation, we've had a really good response, so 560 responses.
Wow.
Which, when you consider
That's really good.
5 years ago, we had 30. So, yeah. So we've had a really, really good response to that and to the Fair Action Plan. So,
Yeah, the questions. Otherwise, Mary, all your comments would, I think the feedback has been taken on board and it's in the report. Is there anything in addition to what you've written down?
No, I think Jo did pick up the two main ones. I might just add that, yes, we did emphasise the importance of measuring progress against outcomes. We also suggested, in addition, because Jo covered that perhaps a couple of deep dives in one or two key areas might be a useful periodic. Rather than that, I think Jo's picked up on it.
So anything else on this? Apart from to thank very, very, very much for this report, and I think we're noting the progress, considering the key issues, there are no plans that's something you ought to have a look at your plans for the next 6 months, which are in paragraph. I just see what tells you what's happening. There are paragraph 8 are the next steps. So back here, back here view scrutiny, and then you wait with the class organisation, the external report culture, which is really important to get that done before the end of the year. Okay, so we all agree the recommendations in paragraph 2? Thank you. Right, so the next report is the annual Treasury Outturn report. And in this case, the recommendations have been noted and recommended for council to note as well. Welcome. So, Jem, do you want to introduce something?
Thank you. Yes, it's a couple of papers in a row from me. This is one of the good ones. We've got a bad one coming down the line, but this is positive. There's been a variance in our favour on this one. Really, the main thing I wanted us to note is on page 56, which is what the Public Works Loan Board are now charging us for. Of course, we have a very large capital programme that we've committed to. And I think it's just worth noting that on a 30-year debt, we're looking at just under 6%, which is numbers that I think the UK hasn't really seen since sort of the early 90s. And just something that I think we've all got used to an era of low interest rate, cheap money. And the actions that the national government have taken have been very detrimental to the UK's ability to borrow on the open market, which then has enough knock-on to our ability to borrow from them. So really, it's just troublesome ahead, but for tonight's paper, good to see that we had a variance in our favour.
Okay. Are there any questions or anything that you want to highlight, Mike?
No, I think no, that's fine. Yes, I mean the rates are quite high now for borrowing, obviously, as you say, higher than they've been. So obviously the plus side of that is that we get better rates on the money that we have deposited, but we have more debt than investment, so get down overall.
Emma.
I mean, in some ways, this seems an entirely trivial comment now in the light of what we know is coming down. But when I first saw this out, I thought fantastic, and well done to everyone. Absolutely. I mean, non-spend, but it also, and it just shows, perhaps going forward, this will be less true, how hard it really is to budget with certainty. Because, we didn't think we'd be looking at an underspend this year, and indeed we've ended up with one, and that's tremendous. But I think I suppose it's always a good reminder that even with the best will in the world, it's very hard to be spot on until the last day. But I recognise, as I say, with the quantum we've got to do going forward, it'll be even less certainty of the direction of travel.
Yeah. But
it's
very important.
It shows that can be.
I'm sorry.
I just think we're rowing back on Emma's very good points there. What do you see is there any kind of big risky issues that we haven't captured in the paper there, maybe whether that's tariff, geopolitical issues, things like that may have an impact, and how you kind of account for that at the minute that may impact this, or we just kind of setting these she goes strategy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is difficult to absolutely predict, and we try and be prudent. I know we had an overspend last year. We were in the other direction last year, but most years we try and be prudent and have an underspend or an overperformance. So, but obviously it is a very unpredictable area because of all the kind of risks and things that you mentioned. We seem to be in a world of polycrisis.
That's a very good point. Yes.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just a quick one. Why are City of London and Westminster so expensive compared to? I mean, the recent loans that were taken out and they were, over 6%. I just looking at the average rates. It seems to be a bit of a premium, and I just wondered.
There typically is a significant premium to short-term borrowing in the interlocal authority market at that year-end point. It's quite challenging to forecast the cash flow. Sometimes we sort of thought that we had sufficient cash to get us through to April, where
So it's short-term debt.
Short-term
That
debt,
explains-
that's all repaid now.
Okay. That explains it. So there's a premium for short-term money, I understand.
Yeah, and there's a supply and demand issue as well in February, March, because generally our large receipts dry up and we're not collecting taxes at that point. So if you've got cash to lend, it's a good position to be in. If you're trying to take short-term cash, you will pay a premium for it, but that's what happens out. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mary, anything from you? No. Can we please note the report and then recommend it to full council?
Agree.
Agree. Thank you very much. So the next item is the final outturn revenue capital and financial monitoring. Under item 6, page 71. Dr. Lisa. Over to you.
Thank you. So this one is again good positive news and really is a testament to all the hard work that the officers have done over the last year. Obviously, we can highlight some of the points, but really broadly, it means that we had £5.2 million underspending, which, given the sort of the economic picture that we now face ourselves, it's very good to be able to have a little bit to decide for a rainy day, because it's suddenly started pouring. But some of the key highlights really still remain in housing. We're seeing 5.4 million variance over. When you look back to sort of the original budget at the beginning of the year, that's a £12 million differential. That's a very significant additional pressure, and it's not pressure that is relieving itself. As you know, as we do our best to try and mitigate the secondary accommodation and other housing pressures that we see. We've more than made up for it in environment and neighbourhoods, with an £8 million variance in our favour there, and that's through not just parking, but also obviously network management and other areas, and really good the efforts that have been made there. And we've already remarked on the Treasury impact and the positive differential that's given us later on in the report on table 1, page 78. So overall, very positive for this year.
So, thank you. Any questions, any comments? Because you've seen this lots of times, if you're not.
I'll welcome the Ian and Woman's obviously now wearing the slightly different hat. Obviously, you know, a big part of the reason we've come to an understand and reflects a lot of hard work and really good performance in that directorate. So I'm really happy to see that. And obviously, you know, we're one of a few boroughs, possibly the only one that has an underspend. So that demonstrates there's good financial management.
And I'm afraid on the other side of this, looking at the housing and social investment, you know, on page 79, the overspend, and in the rest of tonight's meeting, we've got a couple of other papers regarding housing, and I think it again just highlights the huge pressure that housing in our borough is under, but also throughout London. And again, it is. Thank you to the Environment and Neighbourhoods Department for helping, but without that, I mean, we would be in serious trouble. So, and I know that the next paper coming up, Jen's going to be talking a lot more about that, but I think it's very, very sobering to see this time and time again, and we're doing the best we can, but it is
it's a structural problem, isn't it? Yes. Any other questions from the leadership team before I ask Mary? Mary, anything? No? Okay, we've all read this paper. There's a host of recommendations in paragraph 2. Are they all agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And now we come on to medium to the plan. So rather than looking backwards, Alison days, we're now looking forward. And I would say, probably well.
I don't really know where to begin with this one, to be honest. I glance down at my cup, and it's usually half full, but at the moment it's completely empty. So, I mean, it speaks for itself, really. The change in funding in 1.2 of £82.7 million. When you look back to the report we've just closed, where net expenditure of 189 million, it's a huge percentage of that budget. And the national government's position is clearly that London should be raising its taxes to cover that differential, but fundamentally that differential cannot be closed overnight. These are huge numbers. This is something that would be almost impossible for a council to implement quickly. We've obviously been debating it. The report tonight is clearly doing a lot of the day-to-day work about the savings that we're bringing forward and some of the ways that we're trying to manage the gap that we were expecting to close. But you can see down in 5.10 that the phased approach is that it's a 23 million extra in 26, 27, 29 million, and then 30 million. And given we've really pushed the organisation in the last year to try and close a £20 million gap, we're told we now have to close an extra £23.7 million gap with less than 12 months to do it in. I think is fundamentally unacceptable from a national government to put that on local residents, because what does it mean in practice? It means the poorest in society will be punished at the expense of, well, I won't say bureaucrats in City Hall, but in reality, they're not thinking this through. A cut of this magnitude means everything that is discretionary, non-statutory, and items such as giving money to the poorest people through our council tax reduction scheme are all not just on the table, but have to be considered as absolutely necessary to do. They're not anything any of us want to do. We want to run a council that is looking after its most vulnerable people. We're a council that is doing that, and we have good service standards and reports that show that we are delivering good services to our residents. In fact, outstanding, we recently had for families and children. All of that is at risk with this paper and the government's position. And frankly, they just have to think again, because it boggles the mind generally. So sorry, that's the negative side of things.
I think what we really need to report back to the government is, we're all on the, fairer formula, but this is not, it's not fair in the sense that in the formulas that they're looking at, the housing costs are not part of it. Housing costs are huge. And if you look at London as a whole, and you look at deprivation across London, if you don't include housing costs, we're probably the seventh, on the league table, we're probably coming at number 7. If you include housing costs, we come in at number 1. So there's a huge differential there. Then there's this whole thing about notional tax. We're proud that we've managed to keep our tax down to within the sort of the lowest 25% in the country, because we've been prudent, and our bandy is around £1,000. And the notional tax that the government's saying is 2,000. But to get from where we are to get where they want us to be in the space of time allocated is just totally undoable and unreasonable. So I think in the consultation which comes out, consulting, we have to say, look at your formulas, look at the notional amount of tax, and look at the time that we have to do this. And it's not just us, it's other in London boroughs, of whom 4 of them are on exceptional financial support. So they're not effectively bankrupt and going to be asked for more money to come out of the system. So, we're coming into this in a very strong position. So again, thank you to officers. But the future is very bleak, because the amount of money that we will have to take out of the system or find in the system, and the amount of time we've got to do it is just totally just undoable, I think. Catherine.
Thank you. You've both laid out the general picture, which is very key. But I just wanted to highlight, as it says in the paper here, that the formula is particularly detrimental for children and young people, because of the amount of money we're getting with it. And yet we know we're in a borough where we have very, very high free school meal numbers. We have a high percentage of our children who are living in poverty. And we've got increased number of children with EHCP plans, special needs, and our places are going up. So, what we're looking at is actually the people who need it most, the children who most need to be able to have extra activities, to go to our adventure playgrounds. All the things that we've been able to protect will potentially have to go. And you know, I think that will make all of us feel incredibly sad, because the children that need it most are the children that are going to miss out most in this new budget for us.
Yeah. Josh.
Yes, just on basically on what Catherine has said, but also on the adult side of things as well. When you're looking at page 155, when it talks about cuts to adult social care, especially the Better Care Fund, and 6.14 notes that it be completely abolished the year after next, as well, which will increase the council's by 2 million. Not only that, but I don't think this is particularly aligned to the 10-year strategy that came out last year, which basically reforms the ICB space as a strategic body rather than a body that, you know, operates activities, and basically delegating that to councils for no money, and we're not even responsible for providing healthcare at primary level. So it's really, really challenging market out there. I don't know how we're going to bridge the gap, not only in children, but also in adults as well. In addition to all the other costs we have, as Elizabeth mentioned in the opening speech. So it's really, really serious. And I don't know, Lisa and Mike, especially on the health element, do we communicate back to relevant powers that be that, you know, with a cut to some things like BCF, especially funding things like mental health care placements that we have contracts for, then to immediately get a 50% cut and potentially 100% cut, you know, they're helping us fund the most vulnerable residents, and yet that funding goes. So do we communicate that back to relevant authorities?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need to communicate that. I mean, we have communicated that, but we need to communicate it in our response to the consultation, absolutely, because there is an expectation that the grants, all these sort of grants, will be rolled into the main funding formula, and then will continue to be used. But obviously, they can't be used if they could effectively become notional, which is what effectively happens, because they're no longer paid separately. They're paid as part of a main grant, which a main needs-based grant, which we then lose because of the assumption that it's being paid for by council tax, which of course it isn't. Council can't fund everything. The tax is what the tax is. The tax income is what the tax income already is.
So it's like trying to fund a school with imaginary pupils. Yes,
Yeah,
right. It's delusional.
There are a lot of inconsistencies certainly in what's been put out, and we will absolutely respond and make that clear, as we already are making that.
So how does that work with this strategy? Because when I'm looking at recommendations to review its position, and recommend the strategy to council to the main council for approval, if so many things are shifting at the moment.
Well, I think, you know, I hope there's obviously a lot of information in the strategy, as there has been every year.
Yeah.
It has been obviously, I think, I won't say undermined, but it's been overshadowed by the news on the funding formula, and we've tried to reflect that. I think the fact that we have a sound strategy, and that we means we're in a stronger position to respond to what is coming down the road, and that's what we're doing. But I can't deny that now, you know, it is a shift, as you said, it is a shift that makes the whole strategy extremely difficult. I suppose that's all I can say. I still think we're going in the right direction, but we now have to look at first of all trying to get the proposals tempered or changed, and then we have to look at more. If they aren't, we have to look at more extreme, I suppose, measures to address the change. But there is still a lot of uncertainty about the speed of. There's some uncertainty about the fact of the fair funding and how it will end up, and there's a lot more uncertainty about the transition, how long it will take.
Exactly, because at the moment there are no protections still, rather. There's no safety net for us. So I wish you luck going to crunch talks with the government on Friday to try and persuade them folly.
Yes, so thank you to my committee. I know I've done a huge amount of work and a lot of difficult conversations they're having. Just wanted to echo what you're saying about, I think if this is reasonableness, we understand no one in who has, you know, we've had a better position in some ways historically, and nobody's going to feel sorry for us. But I think it is the timescale that it's pulling the rug with no warning. So I hope that something can be done on that. You mentioned also is that the housing wasn't taken into cost of housing wasn't, and I wondered, is density also an issue? Because I know they haven't addressed that either, and how that impacts us. And presumably also not just cost of housing, but cost of any, you know, cost of living, cost of services, say, you know, care costs. All of that is higher here than even in outer London. And you know how strongly we can make those arguments as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where there is some chance of making progress. I mean, density has mostly been taken out. I think it is a little bit in the children's formula, but it's not in the main formula funding. So, but remoteness is, and I mean, obviously, I don't think we disagree that remoteness probably does drive some costs. Obviously, not for us, but for some authorities further away. But equally, I think density does as well.
You can't have remoteness and not consider density. You either do one or the other, or neither, don't you? Isn't that the argument?
And area cost there is some weighting in there for area cost, let's say for the local cost. But I don't think it's less than it was in previous formula, whereas probably relative costs between London and the rest of the country have actually gone north. So it seems that the formula has gone one way in the simplification, but the reality has gone the other way. So yes, some reflection of it in the formula, but we would say not enough.
Yeah, just probably repeating what everyone else has said. I mean, you just sit here and completely flabbergasted by this. And I'm sure with your many years of experience, to have had something kind of literally put on you so suddenly must be incredibly shocking and incredibly frustrating when you're trying to plan. And we're trying to run we are running a multi-million-pound organisation, and so the Fair Funding was supposed to give us some certainty about how to plan for this. It was going to be done over many years, and then suddenly we were just like, as Emma said, we've taken that under our feet. But I think Elizabeth mentioned something really important about housing, and again, in the previous paper we saw how that housing is the big issue, and the housing and adult social care, big things that can make the council go completely bankrupt and have to go into special measures. And if that's not really being taken into account in any significant way, it's not just us as a central London borough, but also Westminster, I believe it's Westminster, Camden, and several others around us who also have huge housing demands and huge issues. I mean, London is a magnet for people to come to, and then often they approach councils as homeless. So I just don't understand this, and so I'm really pleased that you are lobbying the government and working really hard. And if you could please just pass on all our concerns like this to them.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mary?
We obviously covered a lot of the themes that we talked about today, and particularly the need to protect vulnerable residents when we were going through this. Obviously, we were looking at it before it was quite as bad as we now know it would be. And we really discussed the fact that, the council needs to revisit some of its commitments, like, for example, to net zero, and really look at these expensive commitments very clearly. But and for example, with things like the council tax reduction scheme, we've long seen that as a badge of us as a compassionate council. But actually, do we need to look at it and say, is this the best way to spend that money to help people in this income bracket, and be really hard-headed about it in future? And maybe there are better ways of spending that money or foregoing that money. So that's kind of the overall theme, I think, that we would discuss.
I think you're right. I mean, it's not just about spreadsheets, it's about people, and it's about social care staff, school meals, care homes, housing support. And I think the residents of KNC deserve better than this funding model, which it's safety against sort of dignity and hope against hardship. So there's that bit. And then the other bit is that we're in inner London borough. And we don't just serve our residents, we serve the nation, don't we? We serve tourists, global businesses, cultural institutions, students, and undermining the capital services, I think, is extremely short-sighted if the government's looking for growth.
Yeah.
If London falters, the country feels a shock. To Emma's point, we're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for recognition of cost, of complexity, and of need.
And time, we're asking for.
Exactly. And I just think we'd like to pass on to government London matters, not just for Londoners, it matters for the country too. So, on that note, can we agree the recommendation in paragraph 2? And we wish you well, Mike. Yes, on Friday. Housing management performance. Doug.
Housing. Thank you. I just want to thank you all for the team for putting together this report in this format. This is a new way of doing it. I think it makes it really clear. So you have the monthly tally, and then the annual one, which I think is really useful to see. So you can see from last year to this year how we're doing, and then also a really good description at the bottom of each thing. So thank you so much for putting it in such a clear way. And I think in general, we are on track. We're doing well. I mean, Doug will pick out a few things, but I think we're doing very well. But I just like to highlight the tenant satisfaction measures, which are further along, a few pages along into it. And we've just heard that we're now 5th out of London boroughs that hold stock. I believe that's the correct terminology, isn't it, Doug? So yeah, so we've gone through the actual ranking. So we are pleased with that, and thank you very much to all the team for working so hard on this. And gently, we want to have any.
Well, before we say anything else, I want to say that this is your last leadership team meeting. I understand. So it's really an epochal occasion, and this housing management performance is a mere reflection on what you've achieved over the last few years, because without you, we would not be here. And Kim and I know more than I think anyone how much you have worked yourself to the bone, how you really improved every single aspect of our housing, and how incredibly grateful our residents are. Now, you may not believe that, but I assure you that they're writing to him saying, "Well, why is that going? We have to explain it. Do you have a life, etc." But such is the affection in which you are held, and you're held in such affection because you have really heart and soul put your everything into improving homes for people. So I can't thank you enough on behalf of our residents.
And Doug, can I just add a thanks for the 4 Brighton players that are in our first 11?
More important.
Really has been.
Thank you very much. Made me quite emotional.
Wow. The service performance and the indicators just show, where we've come to. And actually, frankly, just to have service performance measures is really took over. I'm not sure we even happened.
No, we did, to be fair. They were extremely, they didn't really answer.
They didn't answer the questions, did they? That needed asking. Jen.
Thank you, and Doug, thank you for taking me on a bit of a tour today as well. It was good to see things through your eyes. And bit of a question, I suppose. Look, we've talked about housing a lot. It's obviously such a significant thing. So I was just looking at voids and lettings, and those which are ready to let, we've got sort of over 60 ready to let. I appreciate it's always a snapshot, it's never going, it's going to be a moving piece, but is that quite common? Do we always keep, is that just the time it takes to get things let?
So, I'm glass half empty person, so voids is an area that, whilst it's getting better each year, it's nothing up to where it needs to be. It was up to housing select committee, last week. Clearly, we have a number of those ready to let voids, are in that category, but actually, related to things that are happening at Lancashire West, so it's not actually that many, as 60, and maybe we should look at different categories, but we can do better, and we have been gradually moving it. We've got a new manager in voids, and I know I've said this before, but it is going the right way. It's just not going the right way quick enough. So one of the things that we are also doing there is we are re-procuring our contractors. So we have 3 main contractors that do our voids, and I don't feel they're performing as well as they could, and ultimately we need to read. So.
Josh, and then you.
Oh, thank you. The main and I will obviously what everyone else said, I won't repeat, but yeah, fantastic work. I have to get down to business again.
It's fine.
Just on rent arrears. I see that there are still many people, unfortunately, in rent arrears, and we've missed our target basically since this report starts in April 24 till the present, by probably about 1%. And there's a reference here in the report about universal credit and the impact of that. So what is causing that exactly? And what's
so universal credit? So people so our year of transition, if you like, most boroughs have already been. We were quite near the end of the queue for the universal credit transition, where a lot of our residents who used to get housing benefits moved to universal credit. So the impact for that is that they don't have, when they're on housing benefit, they don't have to worry about it. It just gets paid by the council finance department straight to us. Now they're getting 5 weeks in arrears in each bank into account. And so therefore they need to decide whether they pay it or they don't. And research would tell us that on average, people who are on universal credit are in debt in terms of their arrears at the average amount. It used to be around 600-700, but so of course rent's gone up. Figures might be that, but with housing benefit, it's almost zero. So that is part of what's made a huge difference. What I would say is the way we monitor it is by percentage of the overall rent roll. So, and that stayed about stable from 23, 24 to 24, 25, despite that. So, and there have been shoots of improvement so far in the first quarter this year.
Okay, that's helpful.
Kim, and then Patrick.
Yeah, no, just a quick one. I'm just intrigued with the recoveries for fraud.
Yeah.
Just 19 properties. Is that? Do you reckon that's about right for the size stock that we've got? We think it's a bit light.
I think this came up last time. So it is. We have had a transition because the manager has changed, but we've really. So it's low. We want to be doing at least 30 odd. We did 40 in the year before. We're already on sort of 10 already in the first quarter this year. Roughly, I haven't quite seen tunes, but we were up to about 7 or 8 at the end of May. So we are hopeful that the cases that are in this pipeline get dealt with, because we've got a lot of cases, just getting them to court, getting the orders. So that's an area that is definitely on Bernadette's radar and more to improve.
But eventually we'll want those to come right down anyway. So in theory, word will get around. There'll always be some every year, but
people commit forward. The temptations. I mean, I get it. So there is some prevention, and there is the threat of that. So when you do a case, and we have made some publicity out for that, but ultimately, I think there's always fraud.
Sorry, the only other question was there was a spike in the open FRA compliance. And I just wonder, is that a result of inspecting? I mean, but it seems to have rolled back down again.
So yes, that was, and we did talk, if you recall, we had some issues with our contractor that, and that we got all the actions on the one go. And so it made it go up considerably, and then we've had to work really hard to bring it back down. On that, we reported ourselves to the regulator last year just to say that it looks bad. We've had all of this, but we've now worked on that, and we're back to where we need to be.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Catherine, did you?
Yeah, it was sorry.
Mine was a follow-up on Kim's question.
No, you follow up.
It's just given what you're saying, that the issue with the fraud is the lumpiness of how of them coming through, rather than the report that was the successes. Maybe it would be useful to see what the case, because it's actually how many cases you're prosecuting it. That's what you actually want to see is, are you maintaining that level of activity? The outcomes aren't always in you, either timing or success, in fact. So.
Yeah, but dependent on the court.
Yeah, but what's key is, I'm just saying, maybe that's a better tracker. That are we still, how many we are going after, not.
Yeah,
something to consider.
well, I'd say
Maybe
at
both.
least you'd want both. Exactly.
Yeah, you want both,
I don't want everyone as well looking busy but not achieving outcomes, if you know what I mean. So we want to be
of course
measuring
not.
both.
But given that at any point in, next week, 10 could come through, you might just want to look at both numbers. How many impressive, how many.
Yeah, get the point you're making.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a better reflection there. Thank you.
Catherine, thank you. I noticed that you evicted 7 households for non-payment. Is the Renters Reform Act going to make it harder to evict people? And therefore, will it actually cost us quite a lot of money? And that we're going to have people staying, not paying rent for 6 months before we can get them out of the property?
So it won't impact on us because the Renters Reform Act bill is the private sector. It will clearly impact the ability to recover those properties, because that's one of the points within it. But it doesn't affect social housing at all. We're governed by different legislation.
Oh, okay, so that's really.
So this will stay as an. I mean, ultimately we want people to pay, and by and large they do, and that's probably it's about average for.
And eviction is the last resort.
Because it means we don't get the money, and the likelihood is you're going to end up writing that money off. So we try and avoid eviction. So there does come a point when you so I look at I couldn't Councillor Ray, because there's been a few during the year which have appealed to solve.
Thanks. If no one's got any more questions, can I just also highlight responsive repairs?
Yeah, I was just
Tell you
going to
what,
say that.
Yeah, excellent job that you were doing on this.
Absolutely extraordinary, the whole, and also the building safety, repairs and condition. I mean, 100%, 100%, all that. And then, when you look at responsive repairs, 87.83% satisfied with their last repair. Really? Well, it's fantastic, Doug. Yeah. And given that that's on also 24,762, and then you're getting 86.86, happy with it in March. It's incredible to have that many repairs and that percentage of people who are happy.
And the satisfaction's done by externally, so it's not us marketing.
Well done.
What a great note to go out on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just incredible.
And I think of May 9, 2018, goodness me.
No.
We were in the basement.
But also, the stuff takes time. You can't always leave the door with money.
I think it takes time. It takes really good people, and that has been you, Doug.
And great
fantastic.
leadership.
Mary, anything from you?
No, I mean, it didn't go to the OC, it went to the housing committee that I was there, and I think we talked quite a lot about the human and financial cost of voids was the main, I think that we picked up. The annual cost is probably quite significant.
So can we agree with the recommendations in paragraph 2 and to thank Doug once again? Thank you very much. And the next one is the housing strategy. which is another big paper.
You've got it twice on the question.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's probably why it's quite so big. Yes.
So we've got the kind of the Microsoft Word version, and then we've got the nice designed version.
Okay.
And if I may, I would again like to start by thanking the team for doing this. Kojo, James, Alton, and Doug and Dan for doing all of this. I think, as it says, this is the first housing strategy we've had since the Grenfell inquiry report. So we've obviously taken that on board, and that is our kind of overarching vision to it. So I just wanted to read out, if I may, that our main vision, which I think tries to kind of encapsulate the three priorities. We will embed the learning from Grenfell to provide safe, modern homes and to promote the supply of different types of housing for local communities. So that kind of underpins everything, and then we have the three different priorities going through that, and all the different priorities are linked to quite a lot of our policies. And so since I know most of the leadership team have obviously all seen this an awful lot, but this is probably the first time we've seen it since it's had its 8 weeks consultation, the feedback from the consultation, and the 8 weeks was longer than the usual 6 weeks. And one of the things that came up very strongly is the local aspect, the local homes, local people that came up. So again, we have tried to put that a bit more strongly in the strategy, and I think that's pretty much just what I wanted to draw out here. But I don't know. I mean, questions.
I think, yeah, one other thing I think we draw out, which is, and this is in keeping perhaps with the kind of the spirit of wanting to have kind of honest and adult conversations with perhaps particularly people who are facing homelessness, is that one of the things that the strategy recognises is that a social rented home, we take our responsibilities to our social tenants hugely seriously, and a social rented home is the right answer for many people who present homeless. But we know it's not going to be the answer for everyone who presents either a risk of homelessness or facing homelessness. And one of the kind of changed emphasis in this strategy compared to the last one, the previous ones, is the kind of more explicit recognition of that fact, and therefore the more explicit focus on finding alternative routes for people that are not towards social housing, in order to kind of more realistically play the hand that we've been dealt, I guess.
And that's pretty much in priority one. I don't know, Kojo, do you want to talk a bit more about what settled homes, what other kind of options?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, so just drawing on what Dan was saying in terms of the options, we had a new applications policy which was introduced a couple of years ago, which was adopted by the leadership team, and in that policy it gave us the position to actually award or incentivize PRS. So with that, we've seen an increase in the number of residents who are taking up the private rented section option. We've also expanded, engaged with various partners. So one of them, for example, is an organisation, Madison Grove, who have some properties in East London, and we have been able to discharge duty to some households who are in temporary accommodation into those properties. And we're looking at trying to find more alternative options to support residents into alternative accommodation. We've also struck a deal with who has social housing properties across the country, predominantly housing associations, and we have seen an increase in residents taking up those options as well. Homelessness demand has increased by 53% in the last 3 years in comparison to the previous 3 years.
Wow.
In the borough, and I think nationally we're seeing something similar. So there is more pressure on the team to try and find alternative options to rehouse people, because the social lettings, they were about 500 a few years ago, and they've got to about 400. Last year was 393, but they've remained between 380 and 410 for the last 3 or 4 years. So that has put more pressure on the team to find alternative options. But I will say, which is a good thing, is in the last 3 years, private sector lets have increased year on year, and in the last year it increased by 26%. So that is helping to bridge the gap. But obviously, it's becoming more and more challenging because we're in competition with a lot of other properties.
And if you sat and did nothing, let those factors play out, the numbers in TA would be going up and up and up.
Absolutely, whereas you've got them
Very slightly down. It is thanks to all of that phonetic work, through the policy levers, but also.
And that's the best in London, isn't it?
Well, it's.
You've had this increase and you've managed to keep
Yeah,
it.
it's definitely in the top 3.
Yeah. Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, 2 questions. So first of all, I mean, I'm a fan of PRS. If we had a PRS, if we rent direct, does that exempt us from some of these new things that are coming down the line, like selective licensing schemes? Would we still be liable? I mean, so my question is really, does this give us an advantage if we are renting rather than doing a PRS, although my preference is PRS?
So in terms of so Councillor Tesman, what are you talking about if we were?
So I'm talking about a landlord. A landlord would pay a landlord would pay a selectively licensing scheme, and all the legislation that they would have to comply with. That would be a cost. If we had that contract as a council, would we get any form of exemption on that?
If we were renting it from the landlord, or if we were the landlord ourselves?
If we took the rent from the landlord, so would we then get an exemption from it at all? I just wonder if there was any advantage.
I think with the select, depending on the borough who operates selective licensing schemes, the boroughs do. If they were operating a selective licensing scheme, the responsibility is with the landlord.
And so it stays with the landlord.
Yeah, so I don't think.
Okay, so
and I'm not sure if I was being really honest that I'd want to, because the point of selective licensing is a way of kind of sustaining quality. If you see what I mean, I wouldn't want the council to be or be seen to be trying to sidestep a measure that was about maintaining quality.
No, okay. No, I mean, it just possibly gives good personal advantage. So I suppose my 2, so the 2 questions is, one, is there anything else you think we could do on PRS to up that? And the second thing is, are you happy that we're doing all the nominations? I mean, things like the Lotts Road Power Station, all those, we got nominations on those, etc. We got the rest of the Sutton Estate. I just really want to understand what the pipeline that was coming through on Knowles.
So if I'm really looking to first of all, in terms of the nominations, yes, our head of housing strategy, health and allocations is all over the nominations, ensuring that we maximise the nominations and utilise them as effectively as possible. With regards to PRS and whether or not there's more we can do, I think there's always more we can do, whether it's incentives, trying to negotiate with landlords to try and acquire more properties. There's even some sub-regional work we can do. So on a pan-London level, we're looking at whether or not we can collectively, as boroughs, focus on a particular area and see if we can acquire more properties. But yeah, it's challenging. It's really challenging. But I think at the moment, what I would say, one of the other things we could potentially do as well actually is turn around some of the voids quicker that are coming up and matching people to the properties so that there are not voids for a sustained period of time. But generally, I think that the team quite well.
I would say also that going back to the question that Councillor Post asked earlier, one of the biggest things we're going to have to do in relation to the PRS in the next 12 months is monitor the impact on that market of the renters report.
Exactly.
That will affect both homelessness demand, but also our ability to act in that market when we're procuring homes. So just to kind of try and understand what that's doing and to adapt our approach on both ends is going to be.
But I think also the market's already started to react to that. We've had 41% of private landlords already fleeing the system because they're already looking ahead and they're thinking.
And there's other pressures faced too, like the mortgage rates and so on.
Exactly.
It's not just that.
Okay. But any other comments on the strategy? As Sally said, we've seen many iterations, but you've done it, so that's absolutely great. Mary, is there any comment from you?
Nothing for me.
Sorry? Nothing from you? Okay, can we please do the recommendation to approve the new housing strategy and agree that it be presented to full council? Together with the outcome of the inspection and regulator of social housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then the final thing this evening is the license agreement with London Lights. Is a confidential section that everyone has read. Does anyone feel the need to go into private session to discuss it, or are you happy having read it and having discussed it amongst ourselves first? Yes?
Yeah.
Good. Good. Okay. So, advertising digital boards. So it's really the right. Don't really think as much as you had actually.
No, but that's fine. Look, I think it's a positive for the evening.
Yes, it brings us into the 21st century.
It does. In light of everything we talked about finance, it's good to know that we're securing. I can't say anything very much because it's on the lobby, but
Yes.
we will be securing much needed income from this site. I think that's about all that I'd say.
It's probably about what
I can't say any comment, but I'll say.
So can I ask everyone to approve the recommendations in paragraph 2 then? Yes.
Agreed.
And I think that is the end of our meeting unless there's any other business. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry. No, so I just.